Hey everybody, this is a Python programming tutorial, and sometimes when we start learning Python in my classes that I teach at school, before we do any actual writing programs, we'll spend a little bit of time with this interactive shell. And so when you just open up Python itself and not your IDE or your whether it be Sublime or PyCharm or whatever, or your text editors, if you just open up Python on your computer, you'll get a window that looks like this, and it's kind of fun to play around with and just to see a little bit of how Python works. So we'll go ahead and get started here. So I'm just going to start off with this right here, and I'm going to type in an expression. Okay, so anytime we're talking about expressions in Python, we're talking about a combination of values and operators. And so here we have two values, both are the number 1, and the operator is the plus sign. Okay, so the values are like the things you're entering in, and then the operator is what you're going to do to those values, and then Python is simplifying those down. So when I hit enter, it's going to give me 2 because 1 plus 1 simplifies to 2. Okay, so it's pretty simple with that. There's all of the types of operators that you would use with a calculator. Okay, so if I did 2 minus 1, that's how I would enter that in. If I was doing 2 times 2, you do 2 with the star in the 2. Okay, sometimes people when they're starting, they'll try to type like a letter X in, and that doesn't work. You have to use a multiplication sign. Let's say we go 4 divided by 2, and we hit enter, 2.0. Okay, so that's how you divide. Another thing you can do is we could go 5 percentage sign 2, and what this does is it divides with the remainder. So when I hit enter, we have 1 for that. Okay, so what else can we do? We can do 2 star star 3, and that's an exponent, so that'd be 2 to the 3rd power. So 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 is 8, so 2 to the 3rd, and that's how we can do exponents. We could also go 5 divided by 3, and it would divide and remove the digits after the decimal. Okay, so that's a way to kind of round your division. You can also see if something is equal to, so I could say 3 is equal to 3, and when I hit enter, it's going to say true. It's a true statement. If I go 3 is equal to 4, it's going to say false. Alright, if I wanted to say 3 is not equal to 4 with an exclamation mark equals sign, it's going to say true. And then same thing, 3 is not equal to 3, and we have false. The other things we could do, a couple more. 5 is greater than, or 4 is greater than 5, sorry. So we have less than and greater than, and then also you can do we could say 4 is less than or equal to 5. Okay, so you can also use equals to with that. So if I was going to use less than or greater than, I would just use a sign. If I want it to be less than or equal to, or greater than or equal to, use the less than or greater than sign and then the equal. So those are the major operators that we're going to be using for Python in here. Another important concept that we can see with this shell is how order of operations are obviously very important. So I could go 1 plus 2 times 3, okay, and I'm going to get the answer 7. But then if I use parentheses here, and I go 1 plus 2, close parentheses, and then times it by 3, then I have 9, because it's going to do what is in the parentheses first. The old "please excuse my dear Aunt Sally" PEMDAS thing that you all learn in math class. Okay, so those are the different types of operators that we have. Now the values in these expressions, all of these were numbers, okay? There's three types of values we're going to kind of talk about today. One of them is going to be an integer. An integer is a whole number. So 1 is an integer, 3 is an integer, 4 is an integer. One of these here, where was it at? One of these on here had a decimal for the 2.0. See this one here, 2.0? That, since it has a decimal, is going to be called a float. Alright, so we're going to see ints and we're going to see floats when we're working with Python. The other type of data we can have value is a string, which is going to be like letters or words. Okay, so we can use operators with these in some ways. All right, now some ways doesn't make sense. Like if I'm going to be typing in like let's say I want to go 4 plus, and anytime I want to use a string, I'm either going to use quotation marks or I could use single quotation marks. I like to use the regular quotation marks, but it's up to you. If I do 4 plus the string apple, I get an error because that doesn't make any sense, right? But I could do 4 times apple, and when I hit enter here, what do we get? We get apple, 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 apple. See, so it takes it and it simplifies this. 4 times apple, 4 apples is going to be the word apple 4 times. All right. Now I could go apple plus orange. Okay, and if I enter this and simplify it, it's going to put apple orange. So I can add strings together. I cannot add strings and floats or ints together because we can't do that, but we can multiply them together, as you can see with this. So again, that's just kind of a few ways to look at what Python can do with those type of things. The other thing we can use, and I guess it's kind of another type of value as well, is a variable. Okay, so here's how we could use the interactive shell to demonstrate variables. I could say A is equal to 100, and I hit enter and nothing happens. But if I hit A here and push enter, it calls back 100 for me. Okay, so I could do that. I could say B is equal to 200. Okay, and then so even though I just entered in a value for B, it's still going to remember A. So I could say A plus 5 now and hit enter, and it's going to be 105. I could do B plus 10, and it's going to say it's 210. I could say A times B, and we got 20,000. Okay, so we got 100 times 200. So you can kind of see how you can use those as variables with this. You can also overwrite your values. So let's say we have C is equal to 500, and now right underneath that I'm going to go C is equal to 1,000. Okay, and now when I type C, it remembers 1,000. And you can also change a variable based off itself. So let's say, so now we know C is equal to 1,000. Now let's say C is equal to C plus C. Okay, so what's going to happen now when we enter in C? Alright, now we have 2,000 because we have C is equal to C plus C. C plus C was equal to 1,000, and then we rewrote it to C, which is our new value, which is 2,000. Okay, so that kind of shows you a lot of these things that you can do in the interactive shell, just to kind of play around with it to see how Python works. They have these things where people made changes to Python based off of like ways to improve it, and I always kind of think of them as like amendments to the Constitution. I guess that's kind of one way you could explain it. And so like they number these, so like Python Enhancement Proposal 1 and so forth, and then they call them like PEP 1, PEP 2, PEP 3 for short. And so they actually have kind of an Easter egg in Python that you can see in this interactive shell. And if you type in, this doesn't really have anything to do with, I mean it does, it's the principles of how Python works, but it's kind of a cool Easter egg that is just fun to show. I could type in import this and I hit enter, and then we get the Zen of Python in here by Tim Peters. And so it's kind of funny to see how this is, and it's kind of like advice in which you could follow as you're writing Python programs. So beautiful is better than ugly, explicit is better than implicit, simple is better than complex, complex is better than complicated, flat is better than nested, sparse is better than dense, readability counts, special cases aren't special enough to break the rules, although practicality beats purity, errors should never pass silently unless explicitly silenced. In the face of ambiguity, refuse the temptation to guess. There should be one, and preferably only one, obvious way to do it, although that way may not be obvious at first unless you're Dutch. Now is better than never, although never is often better than right now. If the implementation is hard to explain, it's a bad idea. If the implementation is easy to explain, it may be a good idea. Namespaces are one honking great idea. Let's do more of those. So it's kind of a fun thing, just to kind of show how that's in there. And that's PEP 20 is what that refers to. Okay, so hopefully that brief tutorial kind of shows you some things with the Python interactive shell. It lets you practice some expressions, and it kind of is a good review of what values and operators are, and how an operator combines values, an expression combines values with operators, and operators are plus, minus, multiply, exponents, and so forth, and values are, that we talked about today, are floats, strings, and integers, and then also we talked about variables at the end. So hopefully you got something from that, and thanks for watching.